Welcome to MSP 1337. I'm your host, Chris Johnson, a show dedicated to cybersecurity challenges, solutions, a journey together, not alone. $1337. It is the first Tuesday in September, and I'm joined this week by Noam Morginstin of Exigence. Noam, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Well, for those that don't know, you are the founder of a company and a product set that involves helping an organization in the IR planning space, the tabletop exercise space, responsibility matrix space, which are sort of three key components for any organization to be resilient in the face of a incident. And we were talking a little bit about this before we started to record, and that is, and I'll use the 3P that I came up with also carefully all by myself, is that when we do tabletop exercises or someone suggests that they would like to do one, it basically is, outside of teaching the concepts of what goes into a tabletop exercise, it can be really a false sense of hope if there isn't first in place a plan. If there isn't practice around the what goes into that plan, you got to continuously go through it and improve it. So the 3Ps were plan, practice, prevail. And inside those three things is where you get into obviously having an IR plan. You get into things like doing tabletop exercises, which is to practice the execution of said plan. And then by doing so, when the real incidents do occur, the organization comes out the other side and can prevail. It's not oh boy, we're shutting down. You know what to do, even if you don't know what is going to happen. Is that a fair, very high level way to just say you should have an incident response plan? You shouldn't just do tabletop exercises.
Yeah, I think this summarizes it very well. So what I see is, people coming over and you said, oh, we want to do a tabletop. And then they're saying, a tabletop is great, but what you really need to do is you need to have a plan, because companies are putting, and you need to practice it. Companies are putting a lot of effort into prevention, but incidents probably happen to someone or you read about them, in the news, and they might happen to you. And how you respond during an incident will make a very big difference on how long it will take, how much will it cost, what will be the impact on you, on your clients, and how you will be perceived afterwards. So that's why we're talking about planning, having a good plan in place, and practicing it. That's a real tabletop, and then you'll prevail.
Yeah, I think it makes me think about when the fire alarm goes off and you hope it's an exercise, but everybody, is supposed to get up, leave, go outside to the predefined location. Perhaps you're timed, perhaps not. And I remember a story being shared with me about they would do this exercise at 2-3 o'clock in the afternoon. And boy, they got that timing down. They got it to where they were like 30 seconds. They'd broken they PR'd their time to get everybody out of the building. Well, then someone really, really smart said, but what happens if we do this and then ran the exercise at 2 o'clock in the morning? And they almost lost one of the kids because of how much panic ensued, because they had lost sight of the exercise because it had become so predictable and routine that when it occurred outside of what they were expecting, well, all chaos broke loose. And so I think that part of why you do things like an IR plan, and you come up with, when you do those tabletop exercises, it's not about repeating the same exercise over and over again until you've mastered getting it down into a certain time. It's more about avoiding the paralysis, right? So hey, I know what my steps are, even if I don't know why I'm doing those steps in the moment. I know I have to execute these 5 things no matter what the situation is, before, you can't save people if you don't know if you're in the right spot. So you got to kind of assess where you are right now, those kind of things. And I think that we often overlook all the pieces that go into this because we think about it we want it to be predictable. We want it to be something that we have a positive outcome when we're done doing the exercise. Everybody's cheering, hey, we survived this. And it's but I don't think that's I don't think that's reality. I don't think that's how it works, but maybe I'm wrong.
If everything, it's interesting. I use sometimes the same thing. If everything would have been predictable, so nothing would have happened. If you can predict everything, and when people use our platform for instant response, I say on one hand there are playbooks and in the plan, all that stuff. On the other hand, you also have to manage an unpredictable situation, and it's part of it. So during tabletops, one of the best practices is also to throw in some curved balls. First of all, do a different scenario, a different storyline, different type of incident each time, and then throw a curveball. For example, if CJ is your key IT guy, well, today he's not available. He's on an airplane. Okay, so
Right.
now what do we do? And I haven't made this up. That's a classic move in order to change things.
Right. There was I can't remember the company now off the top of my head, but the advertisement or the promotion that they use to promote the product, I'll never forget. And it's basically they're all sitting around in this room, and they're talking about something really bad has just happened, and they play the video, and it shows their lead IT guy basically getting hit by a bus. Like literally, they show that in the promotional video, and everything was okay because oh no, we're backed up in the cloud. And so like even though he was the only one that was responsible for backups, three of the people that are around the table had access to restore the data, during the incident. And I think it's, I had this conversation, and I think this is also to your point about, throwing the curveballs. The first time I ever did a tabletop exercise that I got to participate in, I was like, this is stupid. Like it was the dumbest. Like their whole thing was around the power went out and determining at what point in time do they send people home. And afterwards, I was like, okay, wasn't stupid. It was an easy exercise for everybody at the table to think through logically. Like at what point does this become expensive by just having people sitting around and doing nothing when you could send them home and then take advantage of them being able to either work from home or recover the next day, or even consider like, hey, because this has happened, do we need to get backup power so that this isn't a future problem in the event that it were to actually occur. And then of course working into more complex situations as you go. The one thing I learned, and I still hold true to this day, is if the scenario seems outlandishly impossible, then it's probably not one you want to use in your exercise, because if it seems like it's too outlandish, the people participating have a tendency to start using unrealistic or imaginary approaches to solving the problem because they don't believe it could ever happen.
Yeah, use a story that you see in the news. Use a story that happened to someone else. Start with the simple ones, a business simple compromise. Someone clicked on the wrong link. Start with these, and of course go a little bit beyond, because ransomwares of course also happen. You can also use, it's even not so hard. I mean, you can use some available resources, or you can use Gen AI to create scenarios, we call them, for tabletops. By the way, we're doing that. I mean, we have scenarios in the platform that you can use during tabletop. We will enable creating up to updated scenarios using Gen AI. These are not just buzzwords. This is very helpful.
Sure. Well, and I'll give you one that's outlandish that actually happened to me. So when I was the tech director for a school district, I walked into our middle school and they were under lockdown. So I shouldn't have been able to walk in. My key card should have not worked. I got in there, I got called into the office, and they're like, we have two problems. And I'm like, what's the first problem? They're like, we're under a bomb threat. A student has called in a bomb threat. Yay. And I go, well, what's the second problem? They're like, we're maybe, I don't know, 100 feet a stone's throw from the train tracks. Like when the trains went by, it would shake the projectors that were hanging from the ceiling. That's how close the train was. And that literally was the train stop was parallel to the middle school. And they had a train car tip over that contained hazardous material that was airborne. And so now we have two problems happening at the same time. So the first one would have been, like the fight or flight. We have a bomb threat. How do we evacuate the building? Now we're in a situation where we have to shelter in place because outside may be worse than inside. So I wouldn't use that as an
Right.
example for
That's
a tabletop
overdoing it, right?
exercise. Right. So
That's
so
yeah.
so what I ended up doing, because I did turn it into an exercise later, is I turned it into two separate tabletop exercises, and then I combined them after we had done them separately and then combined them together. It was a really interesting conversation because they addressed them individually with, real enthusiasm about following all the protocols, following all the steps. When I put the two together, they totally just fell apart. Like, even though they had gone through both of those exercises separately, when they put the two together, it probably took us 45 minutes the to get sort of the calm back. Like, they just said, well, this will never happen, this could never happen. Then I explained that it did happen. So then they changed their approach because they're like, okay, this really did happen. And so I think, to your point, obviously don't do the two together, especially until you've done dozens of these, perhaps. In fact, I would encourage anybody that hasn't done tabletop exercises, start with something that's super stupid simple, like my RMM tool went offline. What do I do? Like, you can make these like almost borderline a water cooler conversation to get the mindset of starting to think about, if something occurs, what do you do? Not, we have to solve for this in the moment. But if you start thinking about it, get people to think about that not everything's going to remain, flowers and sunshine, that there may be a rainy day in the future, then they at least are not shocked when something that is seemingly a curveball happens. And so I'm just curious, like, how often do you recommend doing a tabletop exercise? And when you start doing them, how long do you take before you start making them more sophisticated or more complex?
Before I go into that, I just want to touch on something you said. So you're talking about the RMM, which is the MSPs tool. So we're talking about the MSP themselves doing tabletops, and that's also when
Sure.
we talk about. I mean, you be your first client. You
Yeah, yeah,
have a
yeah.
plan. You do tabletops,
Right.
and then of course you want all your clients. I mean, you want all your clients to have plans and to do tabletops, but you should be the first one to do them internally, and we're talking about both. The MSP and of course their clients.
Yep.
Okay, so frequency of tabletops. You know, everybody talks about at least once a year. Okay, so do them at
Yeah.
least once a year. That also is required, by ISO, SOC, and other, other
Regulatory frameworks.
regulatory. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the maximum I've heard about, by the way, is once a quarter. I mean, maybe it's even too much to ask for. Start by doing it once a year. Do it well. I think we should also talk about learning from tabletops. Okay, we
Yep.
should talk
After
about that as
actions.
well. And yeah, and improving your security posture and everything. But start with once a year. Go up to 2 times a year. And even if you said once a year, another touch point during a year should be to make sure that your plan is up to date. Make sure that
Okay.
the plan is up to date, that people are assigned the right roles. You have the relevant documents uploaded, at least if your plan is in a platform and stuff like that. That's what we recommend to do. So one tabletop a year, another touch point a year at least.
So with tabletops, I think it's good to touch on that. We talked a little bit about, I said, if the power goes out, we had a requirement that we did quarterly just for physical breach. So, like, it could be anything from what to do when we have an issue where fire alarms go off, and based on how the evacuation went, we do an after action, right? We did one where this was a crazy one. We had an animal got into the power station the
Wow.
morning school started, and took down a third of the city. Like, it literally just, and I'm getting calls like, when do you think we'll be back online? It's like, hold on, let me go and check to see if my electrician's certification is up to date, and whether or not I can measure the voltage that's coming through the air. Uh, that after action was one of the most difficult ones I've ever had to do, because it was completely outside of my area of understanding. Blown, breaker panels popping out of the wall, like all kinds of fun stuff. But my takeaway was some of those physical breach or like, first person shooter, or, we had physical scenarios that we did 4 times a year. They weren't all the same, of course, but they were exercising different challenges that one might face that's tied specifically just to a physical security scenario. And then on the cyber side, we did those once a year. Those were very planned as far as the exercise went. The planning for the exercise, I would say I probably spent in prep for the scenario. I would say there was probably at least 4 to 6 hours in making sure I had pretty detailed, there weren't gaps in it. Like it wasn't like, oh, now what do we do because we don't, the D&D master doesn't have enough of an imagination to take us to the next scenario. And then we had planned in that timeline, after we had finished the tabletop exercise, we came back the next afternoon to do the after action report and find out, where were the gaps in our plan? Where were the gaps? So it was more than just like, hey, let's sit down from 2 to 4 and go through a scenario. We made it more of an all day thing that had lots of breaks in it. So like we would go, an hour and a half, and then there'd be a 15 to 30 minute break, because we wanted people to talk about what they were going through and not have it just be entirely the exercise and then try to come back later and then piece together what they had gathered. But then we'd also have done it other ways where it's like, you stay in the exercise until the exercise is complete, and then do the, review. What did the note takers and the observers find that we did right or wrong? Was there any emotional distress that we should have picked up on and addressed as we were going through it? I don't know if there's a right way to do it per se, but I can say there's probably several wrong ways to do an exercise.
Well, you found out that people are, let's say, willing to sit more than 2 hours, a client on a tabletop. But what I know from our MSP partners is also the 8 hours you said is sort of a golden standard. 2-3 hours to prep as an MSP, to prep for a tabletop with your customer, like a stakeholder tabletop. Run the tabletop for around 2 hours. I mean, people say that usually, the client doesn't have more than 2 hours to spend on that.
Sure.
And then I guess, the MSP goes back, reviews what happens, and then there's another post tabletop lessons learned meeting. So 6 to 8 hours is the whole process. If you got them to sit down for more than 2 hours, even with breaks, you did a great job.
Well, they got through one. I didn't say we did them all the time.
Okay.
But along those lines, I think so. Talking about two things, there's the MSP side and internally doing this and resilience there, and then obviously client facing. But would you say that there's an opportunity here that this shouldn't just be about the MSP doing tabletops with their client? It should be that whole mindset of teach them to fish, not feed them fish, because doing tabletop exercises is something that they should be working into their own culture, because those are things that, what happens if the MSP is gone? What happens if, this is something that the MSP has no responsibility for? Those types of things that I think you and I both know that when a client calls the MSP, it doesn't matter what the scenario is, the MSP is either responsible for solving it or was responsible for making it happen, right? Like, it's broke because of you, or something is broke and I need you to fix it. It doesn't matter what the problem is, but MSPs are often the go-to, the scapegoat for anything that could have been caused by a user, could be technology or not technology related. That doesn't mean they're not going to call.
Okay, this is a good point, because you just remind me of something else. In many cases, MSPs tell me that the client's way of thinking is, do I have a plan? Yeah, the client is talking to the MSP. You're my plan. I call you.
Right.
Okay. So that's, a very low level of maturity on the client side, because first the MSP has to get him to understand that the plan, responding to a cybersecurity incident, and you also spoke about IT and other environmental or even active shooter. So, but cybersecurity incident or an IT incident, part of it, of course, are all the technical actions, but it's a business thing. It's not a technical thing.
Right.
It's not just calling the MSP. So first of all, the customer has to understand that. And after they understand that, then it's not all about the MSP doing things with the customer. The customer should understand that. I mean, they should even be able to run these tabletops by themselves because it's
Sure.
practicing the management side of things, not the IT or not the IT side of things. I mean,
Even if you force simple ones, right? Like just say, hey, we're not trying to do one of the, the all day type thing. Maybe it's just a, hey, this is a 45-minute exercise. We want you to start doing this on a quarterly basis. Here's some scenarios that we're giving you that we're starting with that are not IT related to just help them process the leveraging the IR plan for the situation, not trying to force a situation that only applies to IT.
right. It's simple things. Who's responsible for what? Who does communication? Which third parties do we get in touch with? How does the process of an incident look like with all the different people that are involved? The client, the MSP, the breach attorney, the insurance company. I mean,
Sure.
these are things you need to be aware of and to think about them in advance. Who would we communicate with? Do we have the right lists in place?
Yeah.
So
And there almost always is your list, like from a communication standpoint, there's probably almost always somewhere between 4 and 10 that you need to communicate with. I don't want to say immediately, but relatively quick in that first 24 hours. You've got to get these groups involved, whether it's law enforcement or your legal or insurance, they're all in there. I had this happen. I was with an MSSP and we used to do what was called we called them quarterly business or service reviews. So we didn't want to be business reviews. We didn't want it to be like it's a sales call or a like what else can we sell you kind of thing. It was shared with me as like this is where they have the opportunity to provide us feedback on how we're performing, how we are providing the services that they've paid for. And I remember that every meeting that we did, every 6 to 12 weeks that we met, they would go through this PowerPoint deck, and like slide 3 or 4 was like, here's the escalation matrix. Here is the points of contact matrix. Like if this occurs, this is the phone call. We even had in there the third party. I don't remember if it was CrowdStrike or one of the other XDR vendors that was included in that matrix. The number, the email, blah 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 was all in there, and kind of a cadence of how that worked. I've been doing this with this particular client for going on 2 years at this point, at least 2 years. And I kept going, I don't know why we go through these slides every time we meet with the same people. Like, do they not remember like who they are supposed to talk to, like what the cadence is? And I'll never forget 2 years into this, the VP and the point of contact for the client literally says, I really appreciate that you guys include the sort of responsibility matrix, the escalation matrix, and we stepped through it because I had no idea that we had this in place already. And like I literally I went off camera. I was trying so hard not to laugh because I was ready to provide feedback to our team to say, I think we need to stop doing this because this is a waste of time. We give it to them every single time we meet with them. And it took 2 years for the VP to even acknowledge that he had seen those slides, let alone was absorbing that information. It's not something that people appreciate the first time you see it because out of sight, out of mind.
yeah, but you have to be tedious about it. I mean, you have to
Yeah.
practice your plan religiously to the letter.
And
And
pieces of that plan shouldn't just be only on that annual exercise. I think that pieces of your IR plan have to be reinforced, no different than you would when you have an update to a policy or you're providing a new process or procedure within your organization. I think you can't just wait for those to go, oh, wait, we'll do this in November when we do our tabletop exercise, and then we'll have you reference this in the updated IR plan. I think it's really important that the pieces, when they change, are shared and are distributed to all of those affected parties so that it's not surprise when you do the exercise, because the whole point of plan is that it's plan, not surprise.
and you also need to have it in a way that it's really available when you need it. I
Right.
mean, some say print a copy and have a copy at home or the trunk of your car. Of course, I would say, do it in a platform as we do. Um, Yeah, and I mean, I've heard of so many cases that it just wasn't available because you're talking about a slide deck. Will a slide deck be available when they need it? If they have a real cybersecurity incident, probably not.
Sure, sure. And it's like, who's having the incident? The MSP, the client, both. Um, yeah, I know we joke about this, but like having the break glass, like the printed version of the slide deck, or the plan, the guide, the fill in the blank, the resources, even a one sheet maybe even is relevant in some of these situations where it's like, okay, who do we call? Maybe that's something you have, like, I think about like safety, uh, public safety. So like in any sort of like offices, especially if you have more than a certain number of employees, you're supposed to post things like the poster that says, if someone gets something in their eye, this is the closest, rinse station for, getting it out of your eye. Or you see it in bathrooms at restaurants that says employees must wash their hands before going back to work. I think is you have to have pieces of information like this in critical key locations so that when something does happen, they don't have to go hunt it down to start the execution of the plan.
So you were talking beforehand about different types of plans, and we started off cybersecurity incidents, but it relates to possibly every type of incident, and we support that as well within the platform. But we had a client coming and saying that they have a binder this thick with all kinds of emergency policies, and they were saying, okay, now how do we make it available? So printing and putting in the trunk of the car is something that they thought about, but on the other hand, there's sensitive information there, so they're not doing that. They're going back and forth, and now they're moving it all into a platform. But yeah, but you have to find ways, and the idea of printing and putting in the trunk is also what I heard that from MSPs. I mean, MSPs that do that are better off than ones that don't.
I agree. It's what's the saying? Those who have a plan are the ones that are still here. Those that do not have a plan do not tend to stick around. They don't
Yeah,
last.
yeah, I don't like selling in fear, and MSPs don't like selling in fear. But I
No.
could have also said beforehand that, I said if you have a plan, if you practice it, if you have your act together when you have an incident, it's going to be shorter, cost you less, but it might even mean if you stay in business or not, you and again, and your clients. So
Yeah,
it's you can't, enforce more why it's important to do that. I mean,
I don't think you have to sell it on fear.
all
I
right.
think it's in part, I think it's like the natural, it's like natural selection in some respects, right? You're saying like, hey, there's a difference between selling on the FUD factor, but there's also the prepared factor, like being prepared for things. Like I remember, like, if you live in cold climates like northern hemisphere, like Minnesota, Michigan, it was not uncommon for someone to have in their car, besides jumper cables, like, warm blankets and additional things like flares and other pieces of, like, not necessarily survival gear, but emergency type things, so that if something does happen and you're stranded on the side of the road, you have a way to protect yourself until help can come. And I think that, for lack of a simpler way of describing it, an IR plan isn't about stopping things from happening. It's about being able to articulate and communicate so that you can move forward and not end up just done.
So with you saying that, I want to go back to the learning point because we didn't put enough emphasis on it. And I just remembered once I heard from Chris Lear that Chris Lear is the CTO of an incident response company, that he said to me a few months ago, very rarely we see companies that have a good plan in place that come to us. I mean, that are breached and come to us. Now, what does that mean? If you have a plan doesn't prevent anything. We spoke about that. But if you're doing this process of planning, practicing
Sure.
your plan, learning from it, improving your security posture, okay, learning from that, learning from a tabletop or an actual incident will mean that first of all you improve your process. You're ready to respond, but that we spoke about. Looking at all your prevention tools and all your procedures and like the way you conduct yourself and improving things will also mean that you could prevent things from happening. So doing this process of planning, practicing, and learning, improving is something that will improve your security posture in general, and at the end will also help in preventing incidents and learning from incidents. I was saying, Gen AI, which today I'm talking about that because there's a lot to get out of that. We can take all the information that was collected during a tabletop and create a post-incident report with learning points using Gen AI, and it's amazing. I mean, the report in many cases, like, in a way, is more important than the practice itself, because that's what you can learn from.
Right. Well, I think we have covered it,
Yep.
at least most of it. So with that, I'm gonna say this has been an episode of MSP 1337. Thanks and have a great week.
Thank you, everyone. Bye bye.